In my family's Japanese heritage, we never really looked at health as a problem to solve. It was more like a rhythm you just lived. But today we are doing a deep dive into the work of Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. And honestly, her research made me look at my own body in a completely different way. I am Kiko Tanaka, and I approach health through an ancestral lens.
And I am Dr. Elias Sterling. I bring the clinical perspective from my years in geriatric medicine, evaluating these protocols for the aging body.
And that is exactly why we are here today. We are on a very specific mission for you. We are conducting a deep dive into the fascinating work of Dr. Gabrielle Lyon and her book, Forever Strong.
Such a crucial text.
It really is. Now, when people hear the word muscle, they often think of bodybuilders. Spray tans, vanity, gym mirrors. But Dr. Lyon's work suggests we need to completely shift our perspective. We are talking about cultivating what she calls body armor. This is about shifting our focus from that endless, exhausting cycle of trying to lose fat to the literal life-saving project of building muscle for our independence.
She argues, and the clinical data absolutely supports this, that we do not have an obesity crisis in this country. We have a muscle crisis.
Now wait, that is a really bold statement. Considering what we see in the news and frankly what we see just walking down the street, we see an abundance of weight. So how can the primary problem be muscle?
Because we have been looking at the wrong metric for decades. We focus entirely on the presence of fat rather than the absence of muscle. In the fitness world, muscle is aesthetic, but medically. Muscle is the largest endocrine organ in the body.
Hold on, let's pause right there. Endocrine organ. Usually when I hear that term, I think of the thyroid or the pancreas. Organs that secrete hormones. You were saying my biceps and my quads are doing the same job as my thyroid.
In a very real way, yes. It is not just dead weight you carry around to move your skeleton. It is an active, living organ. When you contract a muscle, it secretes proteins called myokines.
Myokines.
Right. Think of these as text messages sent to your liver, your brain, and your immune system, telling them to repair tissue, to burn fat, to fight systemic inflammation. When you have low muscle mass, which is the crisis Dr. Lyon is identifying, you go silent. You simply stop sending those positive signals.
I love how she reframes this. It reminds me so much of the concept of flow in my culture. When energy stagnates, health declines. And Dr. Lyon uses a very specific analogy to explain the stagnation, the suitcase analogy. I found this to be the absolute light bulb moment for me regarding blood sugar. Can we unpack that a little?
Absolutely. Think of your skeletal muscle as a physical suitcase. When you eat a meal, particularly one with carbohydrates or high energy, you're essentially packing that suitcase. Your muscle is the primary storage unit for glucose.
Okay, I follow.
Now, if you are active, if you are moving, lifting things, walking, you are constantly unpacking that suitcase. You put energy in, you take energy out. That is a healthy metabolic flux.
But most of us today, we're overpackers. We just keep stuff in the suitcase.
Exactly. We sit at desks, we sit in cars, we sit on the couch in the evening. We are keeping the suitcase stuffed. If you overpack a suitcase with calories and glucose and you never unpack it through movement, where does that excess go?
It has to go somewhere.
Right. It physically cannot fit in the muscle anymore, so it spills over.
And this is the dangerous part, right? It doesn't just disappear into thin air.
No, it spills into the bloodstream, raising your blood sugar. It spills into the liver, creating fatty liver disease. It even starts storing as fatty deposits inside the muscle itself. In the clinic, we call this marbling, just like you'd see in a steak.
Oh, wow. That is a really visceral image. To think of our own muscles marbling because we haven't unpacked the suitcase.
It is visceral,
Do you?
but it perfectly explains why we see skinny fat individuals or people with a technically normal weight who have type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
Their suitcase is full because the suitcase itself is too small, which leads us to another critical point Dr. Lyon makes, which completely audits the way we classify patients. We often use the medical term, healthy sedentary. Dr. Lyon argues, and I completely agree based on what I have seen in my clinic, that there is no such thing as healthy sedentary. Being sedentary is a disease state in and of itself.
Because the flow has stopped.
Exactly. The pathology, the insulin resistance, the marbling, the hidden inflammation, it all begins in the muscle decades before a standard blood test shows you have diabetes.
Sure.
If you are sitting still, your biochemistry is slowly breaking down.
That is a sobering thought. But I also feel it empowers us. Because movement is the antidote. We can choose to unpack the suitcase. However, we have to be realistic about your timeline. As we age, the body just doesn't respond to movement or food quite the same way. It feels harder.
It feels harder because it is harder. And this is where we really have to discuss anabolic resistance. This is the absolute hallmark of aging physiology. Simply put, as we get older, our muscles become numb. become highly inefficient at processing the signals to grow.
I have heard this described like an old car engine.
That is the perfect analogy. When you're 20, your body's like a brand new sports car. You barely turn the key, you eat a little bit of protein, you jog a little bit, and the engine roars to life. The anabolic machinery works perfectly. You can practically look at a weight and build muscle. But when you are 70,
The machinery is a bit rusty.
you are driving a vintage vehicle. It is a beautiful vehicle, but the starter is worn out. To get that engine to start, you need a much stronger spark.
So the spark that worked at 20 like a light jog or skipping a meal doesn't even turn the engine over at 70.
Precisely. You need more fuel, specifically high-quality protein, and you need a much stronger stimulus, like resistance training, just to get the exact same machinery running.
But this brings up a very practical issue. We're telling people they need a loud signal, heavy weights, resistance, but so many people listening have joint issues. Bad knees, stiff lower backs, they hear resistance training and they immediately think injury. They can't just go squat 300 pounds to wake up their muscles.
That is a very real clinical concern. You cannot destroy the joints to save the muscles. But the research highlighted something really fascinating here. Hot shoe training.
I was so excited to see this in the deep dive material. Kotetsu, or blood flow restriction training. It originated in Japan, actually, and it is this beautiful ancestral concept of being gentle but highly effective. It involves using specialized bands to safely restrict blood flow to the limbs while you exercise. But the key is you use very light weights.
We are talking soup cans or very light physical therapy dumbbells.
Exactly. It tricks the brain into thinking you're lifting a heavy tree trunk, but you might just be lifting a water bottle.
And clinically, this is brilliant for the aging population. Dr. Lyon is a huge proponent of this. Because the bands restrict the venous blood flow slightly, metabolic waste products build up in the muscle very, very quickly. Your brain senses this chemical stress and panics in a good way. It recruits the largest, strongest muscle fibers to help out, fully believing you are under a massive physical load.
So you get that loud signal the vintage car needs, but the actual load on the joints is whisper quiet.
Exactly. It bridges that crucial gap between safety and the intensity required to overcome that old car syndrome.
It really is about finding the way, a path that honors the body's deep need for safety while still challenging it to grow. And speaking of paths, I want to pause for just a moment. If this kind of calm, ancestral approach to strength resonates with you, we'd love to have you subscribe to our community. We are here to walk this path with you every week, blending the science with the soul of living well.
Beautifully said. Now, we have to talk about the fuel for this engine. We cannot dive into Dr. Lyon without auditing the massive controversy around protein. This is where the old car analogy gets very specific.
And this is where so many of us get so confused. One day we are told to eat less meat, the next we are told we are eating too much protein, or that a strictly plant-based diet is the only true path to longevity.
And I have to be clear that general advice is potentially very dangerous for a senior. Let's look at the RDA, the recommended daily allowance. Currently, it is set at 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. For a 150-pound person, that's roughly 54 grams of protein a day. Most people think this is a target to aim for. It is not. The RDA is the minimum amount required to prevent deficiency.
So it's literally just the amount we need to eat to not get sick and die.
Essentially, yes. It prevents severe muscle wasting diseases like kwashiorkor. It is not the optimal amount for thriving. Dr. Lyon's audit of the literature suggests we are drastically under-eating protein. Her recommendation is roughly 1 gram of protein per pound of your ideal body weight. So if your healthy weight is 150 pounds, you should be aiming for 150 grams of protein. That is roughly double to triple the RDA.
That sounds like a lot of food for some people to process. Why the massive jump? Why does the aging body need that much more?
We have to go back to the biochemistry of that vintage car. Remember, the aging muscle is numb. It is a nutrient-sensing organ, and specifically, it senses an amino acid called leucine. Leucine is the literal key that turns the ignition.
So it's not just about eating a generic block of protein, it's about hitting a specific threshold of leucine to turn that key.
Correct. To trigger muscle synthesis in an aging body, to overcome that anabolic resistance we talked about, a single meal must contain at least 2.5 to 3 grams of leucine. That equates to about 30 to 50 grams of high-quality protein in one single sitting.
Okay, this is such a crucial insight. Because how many people do we know who have toast and coffee for breakfast, maybe a light salad with a sprinkle of chickpeas for lunch, and then a piece of fish for dinner? They might be eating what they consider healthy, but they are never turning the key.
They are missing the threshold every single time. If you eat 10 grams of protein here and 10 grams there, you are consuming calories, yes, but you are never triggering the muscle-building machinery. You are putting gas in the car, but you aren't turning the engine on. This is exactly why Dr. Lyon is so adamant about the first meal of the day.
Dr. Lyon emphasizes that the first meal is the most critical intervention point.
She does. And the clinical data is crystal clear on this. You have been fasting all night while you sleep. Your body is in a catabolic state, meaning it is breaking things down. You need to flip the switch to rebuilding immediately. You need to prioritize a robust protein serving, that 30 to 50 grams we mentioned right at the start of the day. It sets the metabolic tone for the next 24 hours.
So no snacking on protein throughout the day. We need distinct, robust meals.
Exactly. Pulsed, meaningful doses.
Now, I have to play devil's advocate here for a moment. I can hear a specific group of listeners, perhaps those who closely follow the Blue Zone's research or longevity experts, getting nervous. They hear high protein and they immediately think cancer or a shortened lifespan. They worry about stimulating mTOR. We need to address this fear head-on because people are genuinely scared to eat steak or eggs now.
You are entirely right. The mTOR debate is the elephant in the room in the longevity space. But this is a classic example of looking at a single mechanism without the broader context. Let's clear this up right now. mTOR is a growth pathway in the body. The fear is that if it is always turned on, it leads to accelerated aging or rampant cancer cell growth. And there's absolute truth to the idea that we don't want mTOR switched on 24/7.
Right, because nature is fundamentally about cycles, growth and rest, summer and winter.
Precisely. However, Dr. Lyon's counter-argument and the clinical nuance that gets lost in the headlines is vital. mTOR is not just stimulated by protein. It is stimulated heavily by insulin and carbohydrates too.
Oh, so the toast and the morning oatmeal are stimulating it just as much.
Often more so, because people tend to graze on carbohydrates all day long. Cracker here, a piece of fruit there. That keeps mTOR chronic. It is always humming in the background. That is bad. What Dr. Lyon advocates for is pulsatile activation. You eat a high-protein meal, you spike mTOR to build necessary muscle, and then it drops back down to baseline. You want those peaks and valleys.
It comes right back to rhythm. On, then off. Activity, then rest.
Exactly. And clinically, we have to weigh the actual risks. Dr. Lyon talks about longevity versus survivability. You might worry about a theoretical risk of mTOR shortening your life by a few months when you are 90, but for senior, the risk of a fall, a hip fracture, or cancer cachexia, where the body literally wastes away, is immediate and deadly. Muscle provides survivability. If you fall and you have frail muscles, you break a hip. The mortality rate after a hip fracture in seniors is staggering. If you have body armor, you bounce back.
That phrase, body armor, it feels so protective and rooted. It's not about vanity at all. It's about physically protecting our delicate organs and our bones. We so often think of the brain and the body as completely separate entities, but they are deeply intertwined.
They are one continuous system.
Yeah.
We mentioned those myokines earlier, the text messages the muscle sends. One of them is interleukin 6. Now, in a state of chronic illness, interleukin 6 is an inflammatory marker. It is bad. But when it is released by muscle tissue during exercise, it acts completely differently. It acts as a potent anti-inflammatory. It actually helps the immune system and clears out metabolic debris in the brain.
So simply by moving our bodies with some resistance, we are essentially bathing our brains in protective medicine.
Precisely. Dr. Lyon often refers to Alzheimer's and dementia as type 3 diabetes because they are so deeply rooted in metabolic dysfunction. The profound clinical takeaway here is that the brain we have in our 70s is physically built by the muscle we choose to maintain in our 50s.
That is a call to action if I've ever heard one. It's not just about fitting into your favorite genes. It's about remembering your grandchildren's names.
Absolutely. And speaking of commitment to your health, I want to take a brief moment to remind you that we are committed to your independence. Please click that notification bell so you never miss an audit. Knowledge is safety, and we want you to have the absolute best information available as you age.
We have the science. We understand the why. The overpacked suitcase, the old car engine that needs a spark. What is the how? How do we actually live this way of strength every single day?
It fundamentally comes down to dosing and timing. We mentioned the importance of the first meal. You must prioritize that 30 to 50 grams of protein at breakfast. Swap the morning cereal for eggs and Greek yogurt, or a high-quality whey, or plant-based protein shake. And Dr. Lyon strongly suggests doing the exact same thing at the last meal of the day.
Bookending the day with strength. I love that.
While a 20-year-old can eat a little protein here and there and be perfectly fine, the aging body needs that pulsatile effect. You need distinct high-protein meals to trigger that resistance threshold. If you get breakfast and dinner right, you have hit your daily anchors. The middle of the day matters much less.
And regarding the movement piece, I really want to emphasize that you do not need to join an intense gym tomorrow. That is not the ancestral way, and it's certainly not the safe way if you are just starting out on this journey.
No, and Dr. Lyon completely agrees. The goal is stimulating the muscle tissue, not destroying your joints in the process.
Start simple, start gentle. Don't fear heavy weights, but deeply respect where your body is today. Maybe that simply means starting with bodyweight squats in your kitchen while the morning tea steeps. Maybe it means looking into those Katachi bands or using simple resistance bands to get that tension without the harsh impact. The goal is just to send a clear signal to your body that says, I am still using this muscle, do not let it go.
And view protein not as bulk. I think many women, especially in my practice, worry about getting bulky. View protein instead as the essential building block for your personal independence. It is the physical structure that allows you to carry your own groceries, to get down on the floor and play with your grandchildren, and crucially, to get back off the floor if you happen to fall.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought, a way to reframe how you see your own timeline moving forward. We are so often taught that aging is just a slow, inevitable decline, a fading away into the background. But what if we viewed the body like a high-performance machine that simply requires a change in fuel and maintenance protocols to keep running smoothly? The rules of the game change, yes, but the deep capacity for strength remains.
And I would add a final thought on standards versus goals. Dr. Lyon speaks about this very eloquently in the book. Goals like deciding you want to lose 10 pounds, they come and go. Once you hit them, they are gone and the motivation fades. But standards remain. A standard is a shift in identity. It is saying, I am a person who nourishes my muscle. I am a person who moves my body every day. When you raise your internal standards, your physical health naturally follows.
Beautifully said. Let us all set a new standard for ourselves today.
Indeed.
Stay vibrant.
Stay vibrant.